how can West Ham deal with Brentford, who really impressed me, to be honest, this season. I've been really impressed with Thomas Frank, the way that they're very compact when they get into a defensive shape. I think a lot of people talk about their overloads in particular from set pieces, the way that they use Ivan Toney in terms of hold-up play, and we'll talk a little bit about Ivan Toney's impact on this Brentford side and certainly how West Ham can try and negate that a little bit. His hold-up play, his creativity in terms of the link-up, how quickly they get players forward. So there's a lot of issues in this game for West Ham to manage, and in particular, David Moyes. Obviously, I think we'd all imagine that we go to a 4-2-3-1. You'd hope Soufal's fit. I think that's an area that West Ham obviously have to be wary of. I anticipate we'll have more of the possession. I think this season we've seen West Ham try and play on the front foot a little bit more. It doesn't mean that if Brentford try and get a foothold in the game and they push a defensive lineup that they won't get Rico Henry and Sergi Canos far forward. Now, Sergi Canos' delivery from wide areas is one of the most successful in that Brentford squad. I talked tactically a little bit about using wing-backs and stretching play. And again, it puts the onus on West Ham. And in particular, I don't really even look at it just as the fullbacks, but the attacking midfielders in Bowen and Fornals, who for me have to start. And I think the reason why that is to give Creswell and Soufal a little bit of protection. We may even see Ben Johnson on the right with Fredericks out. So I feel a little bit more comfortable having those players, protecting the wide areas, and of course, stopping deliveries, getting into the box. Now, I think West Ham, if you're talking about aerial duels, are very successful. I think Zuma and Ogbonna is a fantastic partnership. I think in terms of you're looking at players to deal with Brentford's overload, I think those two players in particular, and Kurt Zuma, probably more as the aggressive player, probably more as the player that you're going to see engage with Ivan Toney. He has to win that aerial duel. I can't stress to you how important that is. Ivan Toney had success against Virgil van Dijk, to put it into context. And a player that I think West Ham long-term, if we're looking at a striker, would be a player that I would definitely bring in, because I think he's more than just a hold-up man and a finisher. Very creative, links the play. West Ham have to break down that play from the minute he gets hold of the ball. We really do. And there's two ways of doing that. Like I touched on, Kurt Zuma can be aggressive, but also Declan Rice. Now, I think what we've seen in previous weeks with West Ham, I touched on it a little bit against Leeds, was frustrated. I felt it was naivety in that type of game. But I just feel in this game, Declan Rice, like we saw against Rapid Vienna, probably needs to play the defensive midfield role, the number 6. And it's just to give more protection to the centre-backs. It's just to prevent Brentford holding up the ball, retaining the ball higher up the pitch. And I would be slightly concerned in this game with West Ham expected to be a little bit on the front foot and tasked with breaking Brentford down. The Brentford are happy to go long. They really are. They will go long and get it into Ivan Toney. And immediately Mbeumo will make the run off into the channels. And so there is a vulnerability there if West Ham avoid it. West Ham become too ambitious in some aspects, just to go and press higher and win the ball. We've got to expect Brentford are going to go to that 5-3-2 in a defensive shape. Very difficult to break down, purely because A, you have the numbers in wide areas. It makes it difficult for West Ham to overload. Doesn't make it impossible, but makes that task slightly different. And it does mean that the way West Ham approach the final third probably has to change. We're probably looking at getting in beyond the defensive line as opposed to playing through it and finding space. But also you've got those central areas with that Brentford midfield 3. We've seen Onyeka there. We've seen Norgard there, Jan out there. Aggressive players that really help Brentford press in wide areas, but also keep the shape relatively well. So it's a game where I don't expect West Ham to necessarily be able to play through the lines. And also it's a very difficult game in terms of playing in wide areas. So I think West Ham, and you look at Michail Antonio in particular, who will be fit for this game. I think he just went off against Rapid Vienna for a bit of a rest. Get on the shoulder of Pontus Jansson. Because I think in terms of a player in those 3 centre-backs that lacks mobility, it is Pontus Jansson. And Liverpool really showed me a little bit of a game plan in terms of how to deal with Brentford. Now, obviously Liverpool are better in possession than West Ham. They're a completely different style. But in terms of Liverpool's understanding of when to play a long ball behind the defensive line, and Salah's movement in that instance was how they got the second goal. And I feel that West Ham, in terms of distribution from deeper areas, and in particular Aaron Creswell, and I've spoken a little bit about how it could be risky for Creswell to play high and wide. But I think in this game, Creswell can probably afford to be slightly deeper, use his delivery and play in behind that defensive line of Brentford's. Naturally, Antonio has to play on the shoulder, and there may even be an inclination to get those attacking midfielders to create that overload and West Ham to have that chance. So I think that's an area that West Ham can look to try and exploit a little bit. I think the onus is, of course, on our attacking midfielders and how we generate space. I've been impressed with the fluidity generally from our attacking midfielders this season. We've seen teams that, again, either vacate wide areas. We've seen our overload be successful. This game is slightly different. I think we're looking at ball carriers. Jared Bowen in particular, who, again, like Benrahma, impresses me every time I've seen him. I think Bowen's physicality and his ball carrying ability and his feet have improved. Genuinely, it's only the composure in front of goal that he needs. And again, we've got a fantastic player there. I don't need to talk about his work rate. We can park that one. And we know how integral that is in terms of a defensive shape. But him to carry the ball, entice the Brentford centre midfielders to try and press him, create space for the likes of Benrahma. If West Ham can engage and beat Brentford's midfield, then I would love West Ham to try and isolate that back three a little bit more and ask a question of a Pinnock or an Aya and see if we can overload there. And generally, I think West Ham can. Of course, there's better movement in beyond. We've seen that from Said Benrahma. We see that from Jared Bowen in central areas. There's, of course, opportunities in this game. You look at set pieces as well. You probably fancy us to try and hurt them, albeit I think defensively they are very positive. They have impressed me in terms of coming up from the Championship and keeping a good shape. There is a blueprint kind of how West Ham can do it. I think it's just going to be one of them tight games. I really do. I expect Brentford to be compact at times. I expect there to be maybe a few hairy moments if West Ham are chasing the game late on and it's 0-0. And I can envisage that happening. The best thing for me would be for West Ham to get the early goal and see how Brentford react. Of course, we've seen them. They're heavy metal in terms of their intensity. They really and truthfully are. You see against Liverpool, they scored 3 goals late on. So, again, that's something that I expect Brentford to engage with. And that may give West Ham more opportunities in the transitions. And listen, Brentford aren't immune to transitions. Of course they're not. They will try and get men forward. And if West Ham can get a turnover and we can look at Declan Rice in those areas, progressing the ball, West Ham will find space. And then I think it's a different conversation in terms of how effective West Ham can be going forward and into their final third, because I back us in that sense. But it's just because I envisage the dynamic a little bit in this game of being Brentford relinquishing possession at times and then West Ham having to create. And it's really about how we can try and break down Brentford, but of course deal with their pressure points. And again, you look at Ivan Toney and you look at their overload. So that's my take on the Brentford game. Of course, let me know in the comment section what your take on it is. Put your score prediction in there as well. I'm interested to see what people think. I just, like I've said, I think it's a cagey game. I think West Ham have got enough quality, but again, it really is almost at times down to individual duels. I've spoke about Toney. You could even look at Mbuemo. You could look at set pieces. That will concern me a little bit in terms of how West Ham zonally mark from set pieces and how Brentford overload and they'll play 2 players on 1 and then maybe look to exploit a weakness in there if we're in that defensive shape. They may look at Creswell. So that's something West Ham have to be concerned about. But if we win those individual battles, then I think we simplify the task of trying to break Brentford down. And I think we've got enough quality to do that. So fingers crossed. Thank you, everybody. Drop a like on the video as always and subscribe to the West Ham Way if you're watching and you're new. I will be back tomorrow with a post-match reaction to this game, breaking it down, and hopefully we're talking about 3 points going into the international.